There is a moment, not a goal, not a milestone, not a number on a spreadsheet, a moment where the machine you have been building for years quietly becomes larger than the life you need it to fund, where the dividends arriving in your account every quarter exceed the expenses leaving it, where you wake up on a Tuesday and realize that whether or not you ever add another dollar to your investments is no longer a question of survival. It is just a question of how much faster you want the machine to grow. This moment has a name, the crossover point. And today, I want to talk about what it actually is, what it means mathematically, what it means philosophically, and what most financial content gets completely wrong about it. My name is Donald Cash, double chin, gold tie, a dog named Jerome who is asleep in a patch of sunlight and has already, in his own way, achieved something like financial independence. He has negotiated shelter, food, and warmth in exchange for existing. Jerome's expenses are covered indefinitely. I respect this. Today, the exact moment contributions stop mattering, the math behind it, and the question underneath the math that nobody ever talks about. Let me start with the concept itself, because I want to explain it clearly before I complicate it. The crossover point is the moment when your passive income surpasses your living expenses. The point where monthly investment income crosses above monthly expenses, signifying a profound shift from when you work for money to when money works for you. Simple idea, enormous implications. Here is what it looks like visually. Imagine two lines on a graph. Line 1, your monthly expenses. In a normal life, this line trends slowly upward over time. Inflation, life changes, healthcare costs rising, maybe a child, maybe a parent who needs help. The line rises. Line 2, your monthly investment income, dividends, REIT distributions, bond interest. In the early years, this line is nearly flat, $10 a month, then 30, then 100. Then something interesting happens. Around the point when the compounding base becomes large enough, the line begins to curve upward, faster, then faster still. The crossover point is where line 2 crosses line 1, where your investment income exceeds your expenses. From that day forward, work is optional. Contributions are optional. The machine has achieved escape velocity. Now, let me give you the specific math. Because the concept is beautiful, but without numbers, it is just poetry. The calculation is straightforward. Your crossover point is reached when your monthly passive income equals or exceeds your monthly expenses. The formula: divide your annual expenses by your safe withdrawal rate, typically 4%, to find your target portfolio size. Let me run 3 real examples. Example 1. Monthly expenses, $3,000, $4,800 per year. Wait, $3,000 per month is $36,000 per year. At a 4% safe withdrawal rate, $36,000 divided by 0.04 equals $900,000. $900,000 in invested assets, generating 4% annually, produces $36,000 per year, $3,000 per month. Crossover point, $900,000. Example 2. Monthly expenses, $5,000, $60,000 per year. At 4%, $60,000 divided by 0.04 equals $1,500,000. Crossover point, $1.5 million. Example 3. Monthly expenses, $8,000, $96,000 per year. At 4%, $96,000 divided by 0.04 equals $2,400,000. Crossover point, $2.4 million. Simple formula. Your crossover number equals annual expenses divided by your investment yield. Multiply your current annual expenses by 25. If the result is less than your savings, you have achieved financial independence. If the product is greater than your savings, you still have work to do. Annual expenses times 25. That is your number. Now, here is the part where I want to introduce something that most financial content skips. The crossover point, as I just described it, using a 4% safe withdrawal rate, assumes you are drawing down the principal. You invest $1.5 million. Each year, you withdraw 4%. The portfolio lasts approximately 30 years with high probability. But there is a different version of the crossover point, a more conservative and in some ways more powerful one. The dividend crossover point. The dividend crossover point is when dividend income exceeds expenses, not through drawing down principal, but through income alone, living off the dividends while the principal remains untouched. This is the version I care about, and here is why. At the 4% withdrawal rate, you are spending principal. The portfolio shrinks slightly each year, adjusted for growth. There is a real, although statistically small, chance of running out of money if you live long enough, or if markets perform poorly in the early years of withdrawal. At the dividend crossover point, you are living on income only. The principal stays. It continues to compound. The dividends grow over time as companies raise their payouts. You never run out of money because you are never spending the base. The trade-off. The dividend crossover requires a larger portfolio to reach. Because typical dividend yields 3 to 4% on a diversified dividend portfolio are below the 4% withdrawal rate assumption on 60,000 in annual expenses. 4% withdrawal rate method, 1.5 million needed. 3.5% dividend yield, 1.71 million needed. Not dramatically different, but the safety margin is entirely different. At 1.5 million, withdrawing 4%, you have a small probability of portfolio depletion over 30 years. At 1.71 million living on dividends, you have near zero probability of depletion because you never touch the principal. This distinction matters enormously for someone who is 50 and potentially has a 30 to 40 year retirement. Now I want to talk about something that I think is the most interesting aspect of the crossover point. And it is not mathematical. It is philosophical. Most people spend their entire financial lives optimizing for the crossover number. How much do I need? How fast can I get there? What return rate do I need to assume? And then they reach the number, or approach it. And something unexpected happens. The question changes. Not, how much do I need? But, what do I actually want? Knowing you are not required to get up and go to work for survival is oddly very motivating to keep working. Because when you realize you have a choice, you have to think long and hard about what you value. The freedom from being chained to work takes a lot of the stress off the table, even if you choose to keep working. This is the philosophical dimension nobody warned me about. For most of your working life, the question of what you want to do with your time is not really open. You go to work, you come home. Your time is structured by external obligation. You are not choosing your days. The days are chosen for you. When the crossover point arrives, the days are yours. And a lot of people discover that they had no idea what they wanted to do with them. They had been so focused on reaching the number that they had never seriously asked what comes after. I have spoken to people who hit their crossover point and felt lost. Not happy, not free, lost. Because the goal they had worked toward for 20 years was no longer the goal, and the space behind it was empty. This is not a reason not to pursue financial independence. It is a reason to think seriously, while you are building toward it, about what you are building toward it for. What does a day look like when work is optional? What gets you out of bed if it is not obligation? What would you do with Tuesday if Tuesday was yours? Let me give you the 3 financial truths about the crossover point that I wish I had understood clearly earlier. Truth 1. The crossover point is not a destination, it is a threshold. Most people think of it as, get there, done. Stop contributing, sit back, done. But crossing the threshold does not stop the machine. The machine keeps running. After the crossover point, your dividends are still arriving. Your principal is still compounding. The gap between your income and your expenses keeps widening. Every year past the crossover point, you get further and further from the risk of ever needing to work again. The safety margin expands, the freedom deepens. Reaching the crossover point is not the end of the financial journey. It is the beginning of a different kind of financial journey, one where you are not accumulating for survival. You are watching something you built continue to grow without you. There is a specific kind of satisfaction in that. Donald is not a particularly spiritual person, but watching a portfolio generate income while you sleep does something to your relationship with money that I find hard to describe accurately. It becomes less urgent, less frightening, more like a useful tool that you built and that now works on your behalf. Truth 2. Your crossover number is not fixed, it moves. Your expenses change, children grow up and leave, healthcare costs shift, you might move, your lifestyle changes, and inflation erodes purchasing power year by year. This means the crossover point is not a single target you hit once. It is a dynamic relationship between 2 lines on a graph. If your expenses increase after you hit the crossover point, the machine needs to grow to keep up. If your expenses decrease, you cross the point earlier than your numbers suggested. The people who hit the crossover point most robustly are the ones who actively manage both lines, not just growing the investment income line, but also making deliberate choices about the expense line. This is why the dividend crossover approach, living on income, never touching principal, is so powerful. The principal keeps growing. The dividend income keeps growing with it as companies raise their payouts. The safety margin expands automatically over time. The 2 lines do not converge again unless your expenses grow faster than your portfolio. Truth 3. Contributions matter much less once the compounding base is large enough, but they do not matter at zero. This is the mathematical reality that the video title refers to. There is a specific point in the compounding life cycle where the portfolio's own growth begins to dwarf any new contributions you add. Let me show you this with numbers. At $25,000 in invested assets growing at 7%, growth of $1,750 per year. If you contribute $5,000 per year, your contribution is nearly 3 times the portfolio growth. Every dollar you add matters enormously. At $200,000 in invested assets at 7%, growth of $14,000 per year, contribution of $5,000 per year. Still meaningful, but now roughly 1/3 of the portfolio's organic growth. At $500,000 at 7%, growth of $35,000 per year. Your $5,000 annual contribution is now less than 15% of what the portfolio generates on its own. At $1 million at 7%, growth of $70,000 per year. Your $5,000 contribution is 7% of organic growth. Still meaningful, not transformative. At $1.5 million at 7%, growth of $105,000 per year. Your $5,000 contribution is less than 5% of annual growth. The crossover point provides a profound shift. The truly empowering moment in the pursuit of financial freedom happens when the investment corpus builds to a size where it becomes self-sustaining. The machine does not stop growing when you stop feeding it. It just grows slightly slower. This is the mathematical basis for the claim in the title. Past a certain portfolio size, whether you contribute or not, changes the trajectory only marginally. Your job becomes not to feed the machine, but to not break it. Do not panic sell during downturns. Do not withdraw principal unnecessarily. Do not let lifestyle inflation erode the gap between income and expenses. The contribution phase of financial independence eventually transitions into the stewardship phase, and stewardship requires different skills than accumulation. Let me talk about Donald's specific situation, because I think transparency matters. My portfolio currently generates approximately $1,400 per month in dividend income. My monthly expenses are approximately $4,000. I have not crossed the crossover point, but I have calculated exactly where it is. My crossover number, at my current expense level, and my current portfolio yield of approximately 4.2%, approximately $1,140,000, I am currently at approximately $104,000 invested. I have approximately $1,036,000 to go. That sounds like a long way. But here is what the math shows at my current trajectory. With continued contributions of approximately $1,000 per month and a 7% average annual return, including dividends reinvested, I will reach $1,140,000 in approximately 22 to 23 years. I am 53. Crossover point, approximately 75 to 76 years old. That is, later than I would like. This is the honest version. The version where you run the actual numbers on your actual situation and sit with what they say. There are 3 levers I can pull to move that number. Increase contributions. Every additional dollar per month invested accelerates the timeline. Reduce expenses. Lowering my crossover target number moves the threshold closer. Accept a higher withdrawal rate. If I use 4% instead of basing on current yield, my crossover number is lower. But the margin of safety is lower too. And there is a 4th lever that most people overlook. Accept a partial crossover. What if I do not need investment income to replace my entire expense base? What if Social Security replaces $2,000 of the $4,000? Then my crossover number for the remaining $2,000 per month drops dramatically, from $1.1 million to approximately $570,000 at my current trajectory, approximately 11 to 12 years. Age 64 to 65. That is the real number, not the theoretical full crossover. The practical partial crossover that works in combination with other income sources. This is the calculation most people never run, because most financial content presents the crossover as all or nothing. Either your portfolio replaces your entire life, or you have not reached financial independence. But financial independence exists on a spectrum, and partial financial independence, where investment income reduces the work you need to do, rather than eliminating it entirely, is genuinely meaningful, genuinely liberating, and achievable much sooner than the full crossover number. I want to come back to the philosophical dimension, because I think it is actually the more important one. The crossover point is not just about money, it is about time. Every dollar you accumulate past the crossover point is buying you something that money usually cannot buy directly. Options. The option to keep working, but not because you have to. The option to take a lower paying job that aligns better with what you actually care about. The option to stop working entirely and discover what you do with Tuesday. The option to give more, to family, to causes, to people whose lives would be different if you had more to give. The crossover point is where money stops being a source of anxiety and becomes a source of options. And options are one of the most valuable things a human being can possess. A person with options is not just wealthier, they are freer, less afraid, less likely to make decisions based on desperation rather than judgment, more likely to pursue the work that actually matches their abilities and their values. The crossover point is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the story where you actually get to choose what happens next. Here is what I want you to take from this video. Calculate your crossover number today, this week. Annual expenses divided by your expected investment yield, or annual expenses times 25 for the 4% rule. Write it down, make it real, not a vague aspiration, a specific number. Then calculate where you are now relative to that number. Then calculate what happens if you contribute consistently for 5 years, for 10, for 15. Run the actual numbers on your actual situation, because most people are closer to the crossover point than they think, not because they are wealthy, but because most people overestimate their required crossover number and underestimate the power of consistent contributions and compounding over a decade. And then, think about what comes after the number. What does Tuesday look like when it belongs to you? What would you do with it? Because the most important preparation for the crossover point is not financial. It is knowing what you are crossing toward. Jerome has transitioned from the sunbeam to the cool tiles by the back door. This is a strategic choice that I respect. My tie is still tight, and the portfolio is still working. $1,400 last month. Moving toward the number, 1 month at a time. Let the money do the work. In the comments, what is your crossover number? You do not have to share your actual expenses, just the target number and how far away you are. I reply to every single comment. Donald Cash, out.